Why, hello there, YouTube. We are back today with another video for you all. Before I jump into the meat of today's video, I did want to thank everybody for interacting and commenting on the video that I put out probably a couple weeks ago talking about like burnout and sort of how I feel like the game is going and my thoughts on the overall state of the Digimon TCG. Some folks didn't really love the term burnout, so like call it what you will, but I thought it was a great video to kind of put out discussion points, and it was great to see a lot of people put their 2 cents in too. So I do plan on making a follow-up video, hopefully within the next week or two, kind of reflecting on everybody's sentiments, sort of highlighting a few talking points here and there, and maybe bring some other people into the fray. So once again, thank you guys for making that video. Very thought-provoking for myself, and I look forward to what we can put out for you moving forward. But today's video is going to focus on a deck that I feel like is going to be very strong moving into the next couple of months, particularly in a month that is going to be highlighted by a bunch of store regionals. I fully expect this deck to do very well, and it's already starting to make a lot of waves over in Asia, and that deck is Hudiemon. Hudi, at first, for me, personally, I was just like, I wasn't really super into it. I kind of was like, I glossed over it, to be quite honest with you, and just sort of like autopiloted through the reveals of BT-23. But the more I read it, the more I saw people play it, and then on the couple match play commentary videos that I did with TJ over the past couple of days, where we highlighted what Hudi can do, I was just like, wow, like this deck's really got some hands, and it really got me intrigued into sort of dissecting it and breaking it down and trying to make it my own. And I've had a good amount of fun with it. I think it's really reinvigorated my like deck building itch, because I think there have been a lot of solved decks, right? Where, like, for example, Sakuya had a pretty solid like recipe for it. Megidra, Gallant, Royal Knights to a degree had like very, very solid fundamental builds that were not, I don't want to call it cookie cutter, but like you kind of knew what to put in, you kind of knew what ratios there were and what boss monsters to use. But here with Hudi, I feel like you have so many tools available to you, and you can really make the deck what you want it to be. And I think the world's your oyster, in a sense of like, you can really take whatever is available for you and make it your own. And I think that's really, really cool. And I think that's what's given me sort of the energy to like get back into like really dedicated theory crafting and playtesting for the deck. So I've had a lot of fun with it. What we're going to do today is we're going to highlight a few different builds that have been doing very well over in Asia. There was recently I believe a regional sized event, 256 players, and out of the top 16 there were like a good 4 to 5 Hudi lists, all using different sort of like strategies and ratios and recipes. And I thought it was really, really cool. So we're going to highlight a couple of those lists and go over sort of the list that I'm tentatively going to be taking at one of the store regionals, or the only store regionals that I will be participating in this coming weekend. So I will definitely give you guys updates afterwards to let people know how things went. And if you guys have any comments below on what your builds are looking like or what you think about the deck, do let me know and drop them in the comment section below. But without further ado, let us hop right into the first list over here. And like I said, all of these lists got top 16. Most of the Hudi lists, I believe, were like between top 8 and top 4. I think I put over here, this was a top 8 list. And this really was a list that focused on like the level 5 toolbox aspect of Hudi, where you use sort of your core engine to go into a level 5, particularly BT-23 Shakamon being sort of the main focal point, and utilizing that card for both control and aggression. A lot of lists are running the BT-16 Paildramon as a secondary level 5 to DNA Evo, using your sort of blue and green sources, and then going for locking down the board, multiple checks. Most of the time you will have barrier, because Angemon as an inherent gives you barrier, so sort of pseudo jamming in a sense. So you can get a lot of quick aggression in, and while also locking down your opponent's board state, which is still very, very strong. And having access to partition, particularly partition with Hudiemon, being able to play it out is absolutely cracked. So I think that's been a lot of the focus of sort of the aggression style decks that we've seen from Hudi. This one in particular is kind of going all out onto that get into my level 5, do as much damage as I can quickly, while also utilizing some of those control aspects that the level 5 boss monsters introduce. Now, this is the only list that is using the Sumimon egg from BT-22. You do play a lot of Digimon out via effect, and everything is CS traits, so you will always proc the draw 1 effect off of Sumimon. Initially, I was running Sume as well, but I think as I've done more testing, I've migrated to the Yokomon, which came out in BT-23, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I still think Sumemon is not bad. Like I said, you do play a lot via effect, so you definitely will have a lot of ways to activate its draw 1 effect. So I don't think you really lose out on that consistency by swapping the eggs one versus the other. I think it really just comes to like stylistically how you want to do things. What's interesting here with this list is that they're focusing more so on the CS rookies, particularly the Terriermon, which will allow you to play out a Tamer, and the Palmon, which lets you gain a memory. And we've seen this from one of our local players in Tyler when he built his Hudiemon deck and played it in one of our commentary videos, where the utilization of these CS rookies opposed to the Hudi rookies are essentially going into a Shakomon or even a Pildramon at that point, doing your whole sort of DNA shenanigan play. If the body is out on the board next turn, you can go ahead and peel back, because the CS rookies do not specify that the top card has to be CS and trait. Oh, sorry, it does. So, sorry, you can only really do it off of the Shakomon. You can't do it off of Pildramon, only from the Shako. But we've seen that if you go into the Shakomon, peel back, and go into Hudi is absolutely cracked, because now you can swing with it, proc its 1 attacking effect to bounce a Tamer to hand, activate an on-play effect, which more often than not, you'll go ahead and play out a Tamer, proc more effects off of that, and kind of sequence things that way. The wider board you're able to build with this deck, the more damage you can do and nuke your opponent's board. More often than not, when you're swinging with Hudi, when you have a body out on board, you can do Alliance. So first off, that's multiple checks with Alliance that you can do. With its 1 attacking to bounce one of your Tamers back to hand, more often than not, the focus is going to be bouncing the Chitose back to hand, and then using the on-play when Digivolving effect to play set Chitose back out. By playing Chitose out, you can go ahead and bounce another body back onto the board, and hopefully start stringing along some combo plays there. If you can imagine, swing Alliance with a Hudiemon, play out a Chitose, play out an Angemon, or even an Ankylomon or whatever, right? Then you're able to go ahead and DNA Evo into another Shakomon, DNA Evo into a Pildramon, whatever you want to do. That allows you to do so many plays and a lot of aggression there as well. So it's really, really neat to be able to kind of swing Hudi, proc effect, peel it, or swing Shako, get into the Shako, do your damage there, peel it back, go into a Hudiemon. Hudiemon does its shenanigans, go back into a Shakomon. And you can imagine how almost loop-esque this build is, where you're constantly like peeling back into a Hudi, doing things, and as you DNA Digivolve, you reset your inheritable effects, right? Because you're technically a brand new Digimon, so you can kind of keep doing it again and again and again, which, you know, as you can imagine, can go pretty hard. So I think that's really the main focus of this deck, is to be able to get into your Shako or a level 5 and pull off shenanigans with sort of the peel back into Hudi. Your Tamer ratios are pretty focused again on Chitose and Mirei Yugo as just complementary pieces to kind of find your pieces and get as much consistency as possible. 1 Keisuke for the memory setter capability, and the more I test, I do like Keisuke. Outside of just being a memory setter, you give your Digimon DP boost, which, you know, yes, you have barrier, but being able to swing and survive without having to burn a security is always really nice. And then the end of turn is also pretty solid. Being able to say, look, if I bounce something back to hand and then play a Tamer out, I ensure that, for example, if you're playing a body off of the Gotsu inheritable, a lot of times I think the sort of intended use of Keisuke was to swing with like your Hudi inheritables, play out a body, gain the alliance if you have the alliance play or whatever, right? Or search, whatnot. Then use Keisuke's end of turn to bounce that Hudiemon trait Digimon back to hand so it doesn't get deleted, so that you can play out a Tamer, right? So the idea would be to play out like either a Chitose, a Yugo, Mirei, or any one of the other Hudi tamers as well. So I think Keisuke has more synchronization and benefit if you're running a more like Hudi rookie package. Here, since we're only running 2, I think it definitely makes sense to cut back on Keisuke and just bump up consistency pieces. I do like HPD. Still a really, really busted card. Your CS rookies are all green, so being able to, in a pinch, suspend the rookie, evo for free into a Hudiemon. Hudiemon on play lets you do some shenanigans there to get your bodies out and DNA play live. Again, really, really solid. So if you can cheat out a Hudi, why not, right? Cyberspace to be able to play out a tamer out of security. And sometimes even just a 5-cost Digimon too, because it doesn't specify tamer or Digimon. It just says 5 play cost or lower card. So you can essentially just choose what you want, play it out of your hand, and basically just cheat out bodies / tamers that way. And again, the DP buff is nice. For Kuremi Detective Agency for that consistency and memory boost shenanigans is, again, very, very solid. The deck is already very efficient, and I think this is just icing on the cake. So this was just one build that we saw, and I like to think of this as more like a level 5 toolboxy aggression sort of package. This one got, I believe here, top 4 at the same tournament. And here, you know, we're not going to spend too much time going over most of the cards because we sort of did already. But as you can see here, a little bit of a different package, right? This package is stressing more so the Hudiemon rookies, or Hudi rookies with the Gotsu for great search, Tentomon for being able to reduce your Digivolution cost so that you can get into a Hudi that much cheaper. And then the Betamon really, I think, is there, in my opinion, for example, to pick up any bodies from the trash that you may need, in particular Shakomons, because you are only running 4 of that DNA target. So again, definitely a little bit of a contrast compared to the other list because you're running more of the Hudi rookies as opposed to your CS rookies. You still have the Terrier because I still think Terrier has great benefit for getting your tamers out early for free. And then you can still peel back and give yourself that option of doing that play, but you're not overly reliant on that strategy. The Yokomon is the egg that I talked about earlier. Being able to swing and draw one still is a great way to get your consistency going. So I think, again, slight contrast, but still very, very effective. Your level 4 package is pretty similar. Hudi, Angemon, Seadramon, and Ankylamon. I think most lists are running these level 4 champions. It's just a matter of the ratio. The commonality that I've seen with a lot of these lists is that of like 100% 4 of Hudiemon and 100% 4 of Angemon. The sort of variability that I've seen comes from Seadramon and the Ankylamon. Now, I particularly like more level 4s just because I'm able to make sure that I'm consistently able to get my DNA plays going, especially with the on plays of Angemon and Ankylamon. But this list is basically running a very, very healthy spread, nonetheless, of 12 level 4s, which is still, again, like I said, very solid. They run 4 of the Shakomon, which still really, really good card and really potentiates a lot of your plays. But the difference here, instead of going for a wider level 5 DNA spread, what they're doing here is running sort of a... I wouldn't necessarily call it a floodgate top end, but it does act that way in Venusmon from BT-11 or BT-10. Just a solid card, right? Like, it's always a very solid way to go into a Shakomon, do the damage that you plan on doing, and then evo for 4 into a Venus. You essentially lock your opponent out of swinging and doing anything major that turn, because if they have security modifiers, you can't really do anything. And check -1 to the entire board blanket is very, very solid for just giving yourself that extra turn to survive. Again, shutting them down and locking them down out of any when digivolving and when attacking effects is very, very big, particularly in a meta that has, like, for example, Rocks running around, has Gallantmon running around. A lot of decks that rely on those effects, Venusmon says, no, you don't. Bye-bye. So very, very strong card, and I personally am enjoying the fact that I can just play her again. I've really felt like I couldn't find a good engine for her up until this point. You know, it's been a while since we've seen a very solid deck that utilizes Venusmon probably since like Numemon, right? So the fact that we can use Venusmon now, I think is really, really fun. And then I will highlight the new BT-23 Justimon Blitzarm that this deck is using. Is a blocker, which is solid. On play when digivolving and when attacking, you can trash an option card in the battle area. Doesn't matter if it's on your side or your opponent's side, to delete one of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest play cost. Again, solid removal of both Digimon and option cards. This is going to be very, very solid against decks like, for example, Gallantmon that relies on trainings and boosts. Omnimon that really relies on Miraculous. Rocks with trainings and boosts as well. So again, I think it's a very, very solid card. And then you have the all turns effect of when option cards are trashed, this Digimon, number one, unsuspends. And then two, your opponent's Digimon effects don't affect this Digimon for the turn. So pseudo immunities is very, very solid just to keep your body out on board for that. Again, that one extra turn where hopefully you're able to go for game. And on top of that too, using this as a target for like Terrier, for example, lets you go into a Shaco and then potentially even like go Venus next turn to lock them down even more. So very, very solid card. I've seen folks run Craniumon as well, which is not a bad option. I've also seen folks run like just a wide gambit of top end. So it's really, really cool to see like the level 6 spread. I flirted with the idea of Mitamamon, which is again another, I think, good floodgate level 6 that you can utilize. That is one that we haven't seen a lot of in recent times, but it's nice to see it have some sort of utility again. So a lot of options. Tamer lineup, very similar. You see Chitose and Miri again because, again, both are very good for your combo plays as well as consistency. We see more Erica this time around as well as Keisuke. In my initial testing, I've really liked Erica to a degree. I think she's maybe not the strongest of the Hudi tamers that we got, but being able to have bodies out on board and similar to Keisuke, say, look, I'm going to bounce them back to hand to prevent any sort of deletion from my inheritable playouts is very solid. And then being able to have a body ready to go in raising for next turn to push out and just kind of keep that tempo going, I think is actually pretty strong. And I think an underrated value for it. It's sort of like a pseudo Uko in a sense, where if you are able to proc her effect, you're constantly pushing out tempo with her, which I think is very, very good. She is, again, 4 cost to play. You do have to have specific conditions to meet, but that's why I think we see more Erica, more Keisuke, because we are running more of the Hudi rookies, right? That do tend to play bodies out. And if you don't bounce them back to hand, they will get deleted at the end of your opponent's next turn. So in order to prevent those deletions, you utilize Keisuke and Erica a little bit more. And I think of the two, Erica definitely gives you a little bit more tempo and a little bit more aggression to maybe make up for the lack of level 5 aggression that we saw in the previous deck. The only other addition I will kind of mention here is Ice Wall. Really, really good card too, right? You have a consistent amount of blue sources. It stops your opponents from doing a crazy OTK play if you're able to give them as little memory as possible. So great card, great defensive option card, and kind of pairs nicely with, for example, Venus and Blitzarm and all those shenanigans too. So very, very solid list, and congrats on the top 4. And then the last list we will highlight from this event, this one got top 4 as well. And this one, I would say, is a little bit of a... I don't want to call it purely defensive because it is running Pale Dress, whereas we did not see that in the other list that was utilizing Venus. So you could argue that this has a little bit more tempo and a little bit more aggression going, but this one focuses more so, and I wanted to highlight this one more because it does utilize the options as well as Ryuji, which is what the other two decks have not highlighted before. So here we're seeing sort of a decent spread of both the CS rookies and the Hudi rookies. Not necessarily a 50-50 split, but it's still a good variability there. Jeez, sorry. And then in terms of the level 4 lineup, very similar spread, right? Where you're running a lot more, kind of more of the ratios that I'm running with like 3-3 Seadra and Kilo, and then 4-4 of the Angemon Hudiemon. And then you're running, again, Pale Shakomon as the level 5 spread. Tamers, with the addition of Ryuji, This card definitely skews the deck more towards that sort of defensive flavor that I mentioned, right? First of all, you give one of your Hudi Trade Digimon reboot, blocker, and they can't be DP negged, which is very solid in like the mirror matchup, for example. And I think very solid against decks that do like to DP neg, although I will argue right now there's a lot of decks that either bot deck, delete, or just straight up say like bounce. I don't think there's a lot of decks right now that do a lot of DP like reduction outside of Hudiemon, right? So it's pretty solid against the mirror, which is why I definitely would consider running it. But what makes it even more defensive is that now you give your Digimon the ability to play out these options here for free, particularly Comet Hammer. This card is nutty. Like, D-Digivolve 4 is insane for a 5-cost option. And on top of that, too, you play it out, and then you place it in your battle area. And it has the sort of delay effect of when one of your CS trait Digimon attacks, you can proc delay to Digivolve 4 once again. So essentially, it's like almost like a 2-use option card for 5 cost, which is absolutely insane, in my opinion. Like, this is like these option cards that we got for this set are absolutely like a control player's like playground, because they're just so annoying to deal with. Like, I remember playing like a pre-release and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be that guy that is super annoying and just have like, I was able to pull them too, but I had like 2 or 3 of each option card and just basically was like, yep, Comet Hammer, yep, Vulcan Palm, yep, like Crescent Leaf, and just like constantly swung with like my rookies and just kept proccing the delay effects and just was like super annoying to deal with. So they're definitely really, really strong cards. Like I said, Comet Hammer has access to D-Digivolve, which is probably one of the strongest removal / control options that we have available. You have Crescent Leaf, which is great for just bot decking pieces, which again, much more effective right now than bounce back to hand is. Being able to bot deck stuff just takes it out of the game. And then Vulcan Palm is again really nice for just straight up deletion. So you have a lot of things you can do with it. They're not running the yellow one or the blue one. The yellow one gives check -1 and you can't proc Digivolve attacking effects for one Digimon. And then the blue one basically stuns a Digimon and a Tamer for the turn, which are both solid in their own right. But I think here, like, you're basically just saying, like, I'm just gonna like wreak havoc on your board and you get rid of it one way or the other, which I think is just much more effective in today's game state. And Ryuji allows you to do all that for free. So if you can get a Ryuji out off of one of your like CS rookies or a Mirai, for example, you now have access to these option cards and you're basically playing a very like control-y version of this deck that still packs a decent amount of aggression with your Alliance accessibility with your level 4s, your Shakomons, your Paildramons. So I do enjoy that because I do think in today's meta, these option cards are still really, really strong in dealing with a lot of your opponent's Digimon. Even if you don't play them and they just come out of security, they do the exact same thing in security. And on top of that, after they proc their security effect, they get placed in the battle area. So like, the more I like think about it and the more I test, the more I like really, really want to find space for these option cards because they're just so damn good. You know, and like having accessibility to that is always like a very solid thing. Again, I think it's up to your play style. Like, for example, like Wong in his list had more Ryuji than Chitose and really compounded on like Comet Hammer and a couple other removal cards, which I think more fits his play style, which is really cool to see at the end of the day. Like, builds aside, right? It's really cool to see sort of like personalities come out in deck building and theory crafting, and I think you can really see different styles come to the forefront, which I think is really, really cool. We haven't had this sort of variability in deck building in Digimon for a really, really long time, and that definitely perks my interest to a degree. And speaking of deck building and theory crafting, here is my list that I'm running for now. This may very well change by the time I go to the regional on Saturday, who knows? But as you can see, a little bit more of like a spread of doing Ben things, right? Which is wanting the best of like both worlds, where I kind of want that aggression that we saw in like the level 5 toolbox, but I also want that control and that floodgate accessibility that we saw in Venus and the option cards. So my rookie lineup is pretty, again, like I've talked about before. You get access to your CS rookies, but you also have access to the Hudi rookies, which still I think have very good implications in terms of search, in terms of building a board and utilizing Erica and Keisuke to good effect. My level 4 lineup is pretty self-explanatory, as well as the level 5 lineup. I do like Venusmon, like I said. I think if I were to like try to fit more options in, I end up taking her out and just running with pure level 5s and then bumping up my options to maybe like 2 each of Wolkenapalm and Comet Hammer. I really like HPD though for that cheap Hudiemon Evo. Yes, you lose out on the Alliance swing, but being able to Evo for free into a Hudiemon by suspending your rookie, proccing the Digivolving effects and the on-play effects to kind of do some shenanigans there, definitely has some merit to it. Yes, you get more bang for your buck when she's actually swinging and then looping things around, but just to be able to get some board control and some nuke damage, like that still is a very, very viable play. I like Yugo over Mirai personally just because it's search. You know, you get to reveal top 3 and pick a card, but essentially being able to say, look, I'm not going to restrict myself to just Tamer play. I'm going to be able to play out either a Tamer or a Digimon for reduced cost of 2. I think is solid. They're never going to be free, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind, where your Tamers will probably cost 2 and your Digimon will probably cost around 3 depending on how much memory you have. But being able to like cheat a body out for a little bit of a cheaper cost, you'll come to find out that the more Tamers you have on board, like with Keisuke, Erica, or Chitose on board, all you need is 1 Keisuke. And if you have like 2 other Tamers in play, more often than not, you're going to start off with 5 memory, which is more than enough to be able to like bot deck Yugo, play something out for 3, and then do shenanigans that way. So I think you definitely can have merit to Yugo playing out Digimon and not restricting yourself to a Tamer. But I do see why people choose to run Mirai too. Free Tamers is just super strong in this deck that is super reliant on its Tamers. And then round it out with the 1 Detective Agency. I think this is more of a free-for-all card. I like the consistency component of it. It could easily be another option card. It could easily be like an Ice Wall. It could be another Erica for all I care, or whatever, right? I think that card is a little bit more of a flex spot. But like I said, this is sort of the mishmash of all 3 lists that I eventually found myself doing. I honestly didn't even realize how mishmashy of all previous 3 lists it was until I actually am reviewing it right now with you guys. So am I surprised that I did this? No, because that's what I tend to do. I like to be like, ooh, new toy. And then I see something else, be like, ooh, I like that. And then I'll be like, ooh, I like that too. And I want all of it. So I'm not surprised I find myself here. But at the same time, I think that's what's cool about this deck, is that you can really just pick tools out of the toolbox, see what you like, slap it in there, and give it a go. So let me know what you guys think. Like I said, I think Hudi is going to be a really, really cool deck to see and see how it evolves over the next couple of months. We'll probably do maybe a more in-depth like how to play video or a guide to play video after the weekend's regionals and after we do a little bit more play testing. But it's definitely a fun deck. I would definitely recommend trying to put it together if you can. Hudi is probably the most expensive card in the deck right now. On top of your Paildramons if you choose to run them. But as we've seen, right, there's different ways to build it and a lot of different things you can do with it. So let me know what your builds are looking like. Hopefully some of these lists inspired you to make some changes or to build your decks of your own. I'd be curious to see what you guys are building. Hit us up on the Discord, which I'll link in the video description below. Thank you all for tuning in as always, and hopefully I catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.